Hi, welcome to another session on the Rewiring Your Brain World Summit. My name is Maull, your co-host for this session, and I'm really happy to be here today with my co-producer for this summit, Michael Stone. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Fleet. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it too. I really find your breath work really powerful and fascinating, and it's a very direct way to work with rewiring the brain. So looking forward to this conversation. So I'm going to share a bit of your bio to familiarize our audience with your work, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So Michael has a BS from the College of Chemistry at UC Berkeley and an MBA from the University of Southern California. He is the co-producer of this Rewiring Your Brain World Summit and also the Expanded States of Consciousness World Summit, which attracted over 70,000 participants back in April. Michael has been a certified holotropic breathwork facilitator since 2009. In 2018, he developed a new form of breathwork called NeuroDynamic Breathwork, or NDB, which can be done in person or online in order to achieve his vision for allowing anybody in the world who wants to experience the benefits of expanded states of consciousness in a natural, organic way, using only the breath and music to be able to do so from the comfort of their own home at an affordable cost. He offers free online neurodynamic breathwork sessions to anyone at Breathwork, at least one introductory first session free at breathworkonline.com. He has already facilitated close to 1,000 group neurodynamic breathwork online sessions with participants from over 120 countries and has created a thriving worldwide community in support of personal and global transformation and healing with over 100,000 people. In 2020, he created a facilitator training program to allow other people to be able to facilitate neurodynamic breathwork sessions. He's also the founder of the NeuroDynamic Institute and co-founder of the cutting-edge Train Your Brain Master Course, which teaches participants how to be the CEO of their own mind so they can navigate their reality more effectively and powerfully. Okay, that all sounds great. So let's just touch into your background a little bit. How did you get into breath work and how did your work unfold the way it has?
So I have to kind of go back to my childhood just for a moment. And when I was growing up, I was always very good at things that were what I call left brain oriented, like things like school. I always got straight A's, things where I had to figure out problems, resolve situations. It always came very easily to me. And so as I grew up, I was getting great grades in school, and I started to get older. And once I started to get older, my priorities started to change. And it got to a point where one of my main priorities was having a successful relationship. And it was kind of like part of my neurowiring. I'd seen my parents, they had an awesome relationship. They'd been together for decades, and they had 2 kids. I said, "Oh, that's the life that I want. This looks amazing." And so when I got to the point, when I was in my college years and a little bit beyond, where relationship became a real priority for me, and I started getting into that, I really struggled. And see, it was kind of like my left brain was doing well, but my right brain, where it was more like heart-oriented and more like looking at what was going on inside of me, not so much. And because I was left brain oriented, I would always think, I can figure this out. I'd always been able to figure out issues and problems. But this one didn't work. It's like I'd be in a relationship, it would last for 3 months or 6 months, and then it would break up. And then I'd say, okay, try again. I don't give up easily. But it was kind of like this circle, this pattern that I couldn't get out of, this kind of hamster wheel that I was on. And I wasn't willing to give up, but I just didn't know how to get to the other side. And I always in my, thinking brain, I was thinking, okay, I just have to meet the right person. And I wasn't far enough along in my personal development at that point to realize that the only common factor in all these relationships, it wasn't the woman, it was me. So, looking back on it now, it was clear that it was an issue with what was going on with me, not with them. But at the time, I didn't see that. So I kept growing up, and I, got in my 30s, and I actually did get married once, and it ended up in divorce, and I again didn't know why I couldn't make it work. And then at a certain point, a little later in life, when I got into my 50s, I was still hadn't had a really successful relationship. And then there was a situation where I had the opportunity to go down to Peru and spend some time there, which I did. And I got a chance to, just through kind of a fluke, it wasn't really why I went down, but to do an ayahuasca journey. And it was really my first experience with expanded states of consciousness or psychedelics or breathwork or any of that stuff. And I was out in the rainforest, and I just had this amazing experience. It was really the first time in my life that I felt safe in the world. And I'd always felt like it was this, I had to protect myself from the world in some way, but I didn't really know why I felt like that. And so when I got back to the United States, I'm going, okay, if I can have this experience with a substance, the receptors are there in my brain, there's got to be other pathways to activate those receptors. So I went on a search that ultimately ended up in breathwork. And I checked out all different kinds of breathwork. And the one that appealed to me most was holotropic breathwork, because it was developed by Dr. Stan Grof based on his personal experiences, where he'd worked for years with people with LSD psychotherapy. And, once that was banned, he kind of then went out and searched for something else, just like I was doing, where he could allow people to access these expanded states of consciousness, the benefits, the healings they were getting. And he ultimately saw in his research that the common threads where historically, when he looked at historical societies, were that there was always, or generally, something to do with the breath and something to do with sound. And so he went along those pathways, like for instance, with shamanism, there was rattling or drumming. And even with Buddhist meditation, you're watching the breath. So those are the things that he really saw were common to all these different modalities. So he then worked for months on creating his own modality where people could access these states, which he then called holotropic breathwork. It's an all-day workshop with 3-hour breathing sessions. It has to be done in person. And there's a breather and a sitter. So there's this whole structure that he created. And so I said, okay, let's give this a try. And so I had my first holotropic breathwork session and had actually a very similar experience to what I had in Peru. This kind of where I was really seeing the world from a different perspective. It was opening up possibilities for me. And so I stayed with it, and I started to do it more consistently. And within fairly short order, I got to the bottom of why I was unable to have successful relationships. And one of the things that can happen in breathwork is you can actually go back into childhood, actually revisualize things and remember things that is kind of buried in your unconscious. And so in one of my experiences, I went back to when I was about probably 7 or 8 years old. I was having a conversation with my mother and, asking her about her childhood. And she told me the story of my mother and my father are both Nazi Germany escapees. So they didn't know each other in Germany. They met in the United States. So they both kind of had different pathways. But in my mother's family, her family had been in Germany for hundreds of years. They were really part of the culture. And to the point where, like, my grandfather had the Iron Cross, which was one of the highest awards you can be given for courage and bravery in World War I. One of my ancestors paid, back in Napoleon's time, was the richest guy in town, paid him to go around their town and not burn it to the ground and kill everybody. So they felt very safe in German society, my family. And then almost from one day to the next, they had to run for their lives. And, and it wasn't just that, what was happening politically, but even like my mom's friends wouldn't talk to her anymore, because their parents would tell her, she's Jewish, don't talk to her. Or, actually, some people would actually be throwing rocks at her when she on her way to school. It was just crazy, just almost from one moment to the next. And so they escaped. But when I heard these stories, like, my mom didn't tell me this, my dad didn't tell me this, but in my young brain, undeveloped brain, I made a decision. And that decision was, the world is an unsafe place. And that was an unconscious thinking pattern that I carried with me for up until these points where I was doing, breath work. And so obviously, when you're coming to a relationship from the perspective, the world is an unsafe place, you can't trust anybody, you can't trust life, you can't trust the universe, all relationships are doomed. Because I would get to a certain point when I would feel like I was getting close to the person, and then all of a sudden, this kind of conditioning would kick in. Don't open yourself too much. Don't be vulnerable. You're going to get hurt. It's not safe. And so I saw the mechanism, like the underlying mental mechanism that was creating these unsuccessful relationships. And when I got out of that session, like things don't change immediately when you have these realizations, but it started me on a pathway to where when I started to get into relationships, I became more aware of that mechanism. When it came up, I would share it with the other person, which would then create more closeness versus kind of pulling away. And to ultimately, I'm in a relationship that I've been in for 11 years now. And it's just completely shifted everything about how I am with other people in the world, and especially in relationships. And, before, like 4 months was the maximum. That was as good as it got. So it just created this profound way, shift in the way that I look at the world and who I am in the world. And, in that the universe is happening for me, not to me. It just changed almost everything in my life, but specifically in this example, relationships.
Wow. Well, that's a really powerful story and really points to what's possible for all of us. And thank you so much for sharing that in such a vulnerable way. And congratulations on being in a long-term, happy, fulfilled relationship for 11 years now. And I know that you have a great relationship with your wife and you teach together, and
Yes,
she's amazing. So, let's talk about neurodynamic breathwork a bit. So what inspired you to create your own form of breathwork? You're a certified holotropic breathwork facilitator. What inspired you to create your own form, and how is it different from all the other forms of breathwork?
Yeah, so at a certain point when I was doing holotropic breathwork, in one of my own breathwork sessions, I got this very, very strong message that part of my mission in life, or my purpose in life, was to bring breathwork to as many people as possible. I really was seeing, not only in myself, but in the people where I was facilitating breathwork for, these profound shifts in their being and the way they were in the world. And I had a vision of having enough people do breathwork where it could really make a difference in world consciousness. I saw people expanding their consciousness, seeing things from a different way, seeing more connected to the world, to the universe. Once you feel this connection, once you kind of get this sense of we're all one, you're not going to go to war. Like, you're not going to do so many of the things that we see out in the world today. So, that was what I saw, was my pathway going forward. And what I saw was that in holotropic breathwork, it's an amazing modality, but again, you have to do it in person. It's a 12-hour workshop, 10 to 12 hours. You have to rent this huge place because everybody's kind of laying out on mats. And so it's expensive to produce. It takes a tremendous amount of energy. I could only do about 5 or 6 a year. And it still took a ton of my time. And, you can handle maybe 40, 50, 60. A large workshop is considered like 50 people. And so what I saw was that wasn't going to get me where I needed to go. And so I started looking at it and I said, okay, if I'm going to really make this available to large numbers of people around the world, the only way that it can be done is online. And at the time, there really wasn't online breathwork available. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 people doing it. And so I didn't even know if it would work, but I saw that was really the only pathway if I really wanted to accomplish that mission of bringing it to the world in a way where people could do it conveniently and inexpensively. So I started to experiment and to work with people and to do sample sessions online and to see, would it really work? And also, if you had large numbers of people with just, a facilitator doing it online, could it be done safely? So that people will not drop in unless they feel safe. When I say drop in, go into these expanded states of consciousness, unless they feel like they're in a place where they're completely safe in allowing themselves to have these sometimes very intense inner experiences. And what I saw was, after 6 months of experimentation and of working with people and getting feedback, was that it worked incredibly well. And even to the point where some people preferred doing breathwork online because they didn't have to drive home afterwards. Some people feel like when they're in a group, some people love being in, in-person groups where they flow with the group energy. Some people feel a little bit self-conscious. and they feel much more comfortable if they can do it in pajamas in their bedroom, and if they're releasing and moving around or making sounds that there's no one there to hear them. So, once I saw that it would work, I said, okay, I'm going to make this happen. And, immediately I started to get these thinking patterns coming up. But at this point, I'd done enough work on myself where I could actually take a step back and watch them instead of letting them run my life. And the first one was, Michael, you're too old to do this. You're like retirement age. What are you thinking? Online businesses are for kids. It's like, what? And so that was the first kind of thinking pattern I was aware of. And then the second thing was, Michael, you don't like social media. It's like, I tried Facebook at one time because I'm curious. And at that point, when I tried it, the only thing I could find was people putting up pictures of the meals that they'd had and their cats and their dogs. And we're going, what's the big deal about this? So I said, okay, not for me. And I really was in a place personally where I said, okay, I want my private time. I don't want to be bothered. I didn't have an iPhone or anything like that. And so I saw that I was going to have to make a really big shift in the way that I was seeing the world. And if this had been 10, 15 years ago, that would have probably been the end. That would have stopped me, all that negative self-talk. But I'd done enough work on myself at that point to see that I don't have to believe my thoughts. And these are all like conditionings, patterns that aren't necessarily true. And so I put all that aside and I told my little thought entity or ego mind, say, thank you for sharing, but I don't believe these thoughts. And so I pushed on ahead, and to the point where now I've got a modality where there's over 100,000 people on the platform from 120 different countries. Much of it is word of mouth because people are really getting profound, amazing results. And my secondary purpose, in addition to just allowing people to access these states, was to allow people to really take it back into their lives, the results, and create an integration structure so that they could really have it make a difference in their everyday life and not just have it be like this peak experience and then kind of go back into their life and just have it be like sometimes when we go to these weekend workshops and get all high and then, come back into our lives and it all just kind of goes away. And so part of that was I made the breath work what I call non-directive. And almost all of the breath work out there is directed by the facilitator in one way or another, where the facilitator is saying during the session, breathe deeper or access love or this or that. And my purpose was that I wanted people during the session to access their own inner resources to bring up the experience that they needed. And like what I found myself was, and this is how holotropic works. So I kind of brought that into my own breath work, but almost no other breath work out there works like this. So it's really about people access this deeper part of their psyche. I call it the inner guiding intelligence. And so the experience is brought up from within yourself. And since it is brought up from within yourself, you can be confident that what's brought up is something that you're ready and capable of handling in the moment. And that you have the resources to handle it. And it's the experience that's most beneficial to you, for you to have in that moment, in that session. And that it'll be brought to you in the way that's most effective. Some people are more visual, some people are more kinesthetic. And so people have all different kinds of experiences during this breath work. And the other thing was making it so that people could do it with repetition and consistency. And, we've all heard this famous saying that the neurons that fire together, wire together by Donald Hebb. And unless you do anything in life with consistency and repetition, you're not going to be really creating strong neural pathways. And so what I found was I started by doing 5 sessions every week, offering to people that wanted to join. And so people could really do it, not just like once every 3 months, like in my sessions with holotropic. They could do it once a month, twice a month, 3 times a week, even 4 times a week. And what I would see is that as they started to do it more often, they actually did bring the results back into their life. And in surveys, when I did surveys after holotropic breath work, that was less evident. But after neurodynamic breath work with regular breathing, 75% of people got better contact with this inner guiding intelligence, this inner resource that they have. And it's kind of in the same way if your body gets a cut, it knows how to heal itself. It knows what it needs to do. In the same way, if you can quiet the ego mind, you have this inner guidance. Some people call it connection to source, higher intelligence, innate intelligence that we all have, that has this drive towards integration and wholeness that we can access during these breathing sessions. And people got better access to that in their everyday lives, got better access to their intuition, to their creativity. So, at first it was a theory, but once I started doing more and more surveys, it was really clear that it was working and creating these new neural pathways that people could then feel more self-empowered in their lives and being able to, when they needed to make a decision, not go into the outside world to get an answer, but just basically connect more deeply into themselves where the answer already lay.
So you've been referencing this already, that with consistent practice, breath work is actually reshaping the neural architecture of the brain, which is what this summit is all about. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, about how, and interestingly, you're talking about with this kind of very empowering and self-directed form, any given breathwork session might be very different. It might be very different in its intensity, even in the breath pattern that people are using. So in terms of the science of it, I'm curious as to, if somebody was using a breathwork modality with a specific intensity, a specific pattern, they know it's going to produce this specific result in the brain over time. But this looks like it's kind of could look many different ways. So how do you understand, or how do you think about, or what does your research show what's actually going on in the brain with these sessions, sort of in general, and then maybe the variations in it because of the variation in the way people are doing it?
Right. Yeah, there's definitely, back when I first started breath work, there really wasn't much science behind it. People just knew it worked. But now it's developed a lot further, and a lot of it has been because of psychedelics. There's been, a lot of research behind, what's been going on in the brain in psychedelics. And it's also been shown that in many ways, like the changes that are happening in the brain are similar in breath work too. And basically what's happening is that the deeper, faster breathing causes a loss of carbon dioxide in the blood, and the body compensates by creating more CO2. And the process of CO2 creation lowers blood acidity, so the blood temporarily becomes more alkaline. And the higher alkalinity or lower CO2 results in reduced electrical activity in certain specific areas of the brain. And one of the parts of the brain that's most heavily impacted is what is called the default mode network, or DMN. And part of that is the frontal cortex. And the default mode network is active when you're not focusing on a specific task. And it plays an important role in the creation of mental constructs, with the most important of which is the self or the ego. And these constructs are very important for survival. They serve a purpose, but they also result in a sense of separation from others and from nature. And when activity in the default mode network falls off significantly, the ego mind can temporarily lose its hold over you. And they've actually studied like these changes in the brain where people are doing this deeper, faster breathing and with fMRI, and they can show that there's less activity in the default mode network.
My understanding of the default mode network, it also is involved. It's the kind of noisy part of our brain when we're not directing our attention. So it can be involved in a lot of habituated thinking, a lot of negative self-talk, ruminating about the past, worrying, fantasizing about the future, constantly thinking about me and what others think about me. So it's the source of a lot of our self-created stress.
Yes.
So I would imagine it's a big relief if that quiets down a bit. But then also, as that quiets down, do we gain access to other capacities of the brain or other dimensions of consciousness?
Yeah, and that's why it's important especially when I give people directions in the breathing. The neurodynamic sessions are about 2 hours because there's about a 30-minute intro talk for safety to allow people to really understand everything that could happen to them. It's about an hour breathing session, then a sharing circle at the end. And so, part of the instructions are for the first part of the set, especially the first 10 or 15 minutes, to really focus on the deeper, faster breathing and to make sure to stay with it, because it does take, maybe 10, 12 minutes for these changes to happen in the brain. And once they do, it allows people, and the ego mind is kind of quiet, it allows people to access their many stuff that's normally just available in their unconscious mind. But it becomes available to their consciousness through the quieting of the default mode network. And once that happens, it allows for a wide variety of experiences. And just to give you some examples of the kind of categories of experiences that people have with neurodynamic breathwork. And again, this is not theory. This is, after working with tens of thousands of people, what people actually report. Sometimes you can call like neurodynamic breathwork an active embodiment meditation, because it does allow the body to release a lot of stuff that's stuck, basically. And anytime we suppress an emotion into the body, there's always this kind of bioenergetic block that's attached to it. And one of the things that happens in breathwork, a very common first-time experience, is that the body releases a lot of tension and stress. So, and the way it does that is in several ways. Sometimes like you'll get hot or you'll get cold. Other times you actually feel numbness in the body and then the feeling comes back. Other times like the body will like maximize the tension in certain areas and then it goes completely a different way and then releases. And so, during these first sessions, many times people get quite intense body releases. So that's one of the types of experiences. The other type of experience is that many times people get visuals, just like in psychedelics, because there is a similar way that it works in the brain in psychedelics, where some of this stuff is now available, where people can get like fractals like in psychedelics, or sometimes they'll dive into childhood experiences, as we were talking about, where you actually see yourself as a child going through something, but instead of seeing it from the way that as a child you saw it, because when we're children, we have very limited resources in our brain, where you're seeing it from a more adult perspective, where you see the same incident, but from a perspective that's more empowering versus something that's holding you back and, creating something in your life that's keeping you from really living the life that you want, like a trauma that happened to you in childhood or whatever. And, after an experience like that, you can come out, and many times it creates this very profound healing in terms of how you are in the world. And you're just like, it's the same thing like happened to me with relationships, where I saw something that happened from a different angle. Sometimes people feel like they go to past life experiences, or they feel like they feel more connected, like I did with the ayahuasca. They feel more connected to the universe. They feel more self-love. They feel like they're just kind of dissolved into everything, and they're part of everything. They feel more connected to the planet. Sometimes people go through what we call a rebirthing experience. Your birth process is the most traumatic thing that will ever happen to you. You're like fighting for life, going through the birth canal. And so many times there's trauma left in your body from that. So some of the trauma is released around that. So all of those experiences are available to you. And also sometimes people make a lot of sound. And, many times we have this unconscious pattern that it's not okay to make loud sounds from childhood. Where it kind of like, don't bother people. It's like, don't be so noisy. And actually those sound release can be incredibly healing and powerful. And many times people have these experiences where they just and it can be chanting, it can be screaming or yelling, and they feel profoundly different after they do that. And they haven't done that in maybe decades, where they just let themselves go. And, part of the important thing, it's not just a physiological thing that's happening in your body that makes neurodynamic breathwork work. There's also a psychological factor and also music, because it is done to music. And psychologically, one of the instructions that we give people is to let go, to surrender to the process, to allow whatever wants to happen, to encourage. If something comes up, just to really encourage that the only way beyond is through. And in general in life, it's the opposite. We suppress a tremendous amount of things in life, especially things that we consider negative experiences or negative emotions. And because it's like, if you're around people and you express anger, they're going to pull back. No one wants to be around an angry person. But if you mask that in something that's more socially acceptable, like sadness, then people will come, oh, I'm so sorry, whatever. So many times we learn to really mask our emotions in these negative things because we want to be liked. And, being liked, comes from our history too, where if we weren't in communities, there was a huge risk of not living. So it's embedded, wanting to be liked in social situations. So, so once you give yourself permission to release, you tell your brain that, it creates this very powerful new way of being where sometimes even before the breathing starts, people will start to release just by telling themselves. Self-talk is incredibly important. Your brain listens to you. People will go into the process even before the breathing starts. And then the music also has this incredible power to kind of carry you on your journey. And all that just kind of weaves together in this very beautiful way to create the process and allow people to dive into these deep healing experiences.
Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of our conversation, Michael, you shared very powerfully how breathwork transformed your capacity to be in relationship and to be able to create a lasting, primary relationship for yourself. There's some other specific benefits in terms of your overall mental, emotional, spiritual well-being that breathwork has created for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, just to give you some examples, well, as I said, I found my purpose in life. That's a huge one. And I'm not afraid to set big goals. I used to set goals that I was 100% clear I could achieve because in my mind, if I didn't achieve it, I'd be failing. And so that whole thinking pattern has dissolved. And I see now I set, giant goals. And, even if I don't get there, if I get 75% of the way there, I'm already 5,000% above what I would have done if I'd have just set like a little goal that I could have clearly reached. Even like in breathwork, I have this vision of allowing 10 million new people in the world to experience breathwork that would have not normally done so, to really create this profound change in world consciousness. Because I truly believe Einstein, when he said that we cannot resolve the issues from the same level of consciousness from which they were created. So I'm able to set, these kind of massive transformational goals that I could have never done before. Another thing is I come from the space that the universe is happening for me, not to me. And that changed everything. I don't live life from a place of fear anymore. And it's more like, there's a Joseph Campbell quote. I think it was something like, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And I totally believe that. So when fear comes up, I treat it more as kind of like a green light. That's the direction I need to go to get to my next level in life versus, pulling back as, which is what I used to do. And another super important thing is I realize I don't have to believe my thoughts. When my negative self-talk comes up, I'm more aware of it and I don't let it guide my actions. I also feel more connected to myself and the world. I trust myself more. When I have a big decision to make, I don't try to figure it out. I just kind of connect with myself more deeply, take some deep breaths, and really feel into what the answer is. I used to get into these crazy patterns of trying to figure stuff out, positives, negatives. I didn't do anything. I was just stuck because I couldn't ever kind of get this clear path forward. And I guess the last thing is I just became incredibly clear that my outer world reflects my inner world. If my inner world is full of fear, then I project an outer world that's full of fear. If my inner world is chaotic, my outer world is chaotic. I used to love watching the news, and the more dramatic and the more negative and the more intense, the more I loved it, the more excitement I got out of it. And I'm just not interested in the news anymore. Because it's like, you're not seeing the whole story. You're seeing a story that the media wants you to see so that you're going to come back and watch again. So you get excited. So you feel this drama that your ego mind loves. And so now it's like I come from a different space. I've made a conscious choice rather than focusing on the chaos in the world to focus on the beauty in the world in every moment. And that makes a tremendous amount of difference in how I experience life on an everyday basis.
Wow. Well, those are extraordinary benefits. I'm sure that sound good to all of us. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you to kind of lead a short breathwork session, kind of a teaser, so people understand what is it that we're actually talking about if they've never done this kind of breathwork. And I want to make sure we have plenty of time for that. But I wonder also if you could just point to any other specific benefits that your participants, I know you survey them a lot, you're in community, you get a lot of feedback. So are there some specific benefits that stand out that they're experiencing over time in their lives? Specific changes, beneficial changes?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And just to give you some specific percentages, because this really kind of blew my mind when I first saw it, when I first got these results. When they're doing medications and getting them approved, even if they get a few percent difference in results, they consider that a success. And when people, responded to my surveys, who were regular breathers, 89% reported some or most major relief from anxiety. 84% some or major relief from trauma. 75% better access to, whatever they call it, inner guiding intelligence, inner wisdom source, that kind of inner resource that they normally weren't connected to. 67% reported some or major relief from depression. 61% increased connection to intuition. And more than half greater self-awareness, feeling more embodied in their life, better romantic relationships, more ability to relax and go with the flow and feeling more calm and peaceful in their life, increased self-trust, being more present in life, having a deeper experience in every moment, and having more clarity on their purpose in life. And, not everybody got all of those, obviously, but even having just one or two can make a huge, huge difference in how you experience life on an everyday basis.
Well, it's really amazing, and that you can make this so widely available and affordable for people, and it doesn't require taking any substances. It just, all you got to do is breathe and the music, and there it is, right? So, really amazing. So, why don't you lead us in a brief session so we can at least get a little taste of it?
Well, absolutely.
I know the quality of the sound's important, so I'm going to put on some headphones here.
Yes, and that's actually true for everybody. If you have an over-the-ear headset or something, whatever way you get the best sound quality, that's where you want to go. Okay, so at this point, so first of all, in terms of the breathing, and this is going to be a very short sampler session, so like about 7 minutes. And again, usually the breathing is for 1 hour, and the music gets it's very evocative. It comes to a crescendo in the middle, comes down to a very gentle ending. So this is going to be a more gentle session. And it's really just a chance for you to look at, just by doing like breathing for a few minutes, is there a shift in how you feel in your body and how you experience, what's happening around you, just from a few minutes of breathing. So what you're going to do is during the session, you're going to have your eyes closed all the way through. If you want to put an eye mask on, you can, but you don't have to. This is an adventure of inner discovery. And you're going to want to breathe in a way where you're breathing fully and deeply and in and out through the mouth. In everyday life, we do nose breathing, but for this, it's more effective if you do mouth breathing. So you're going to be breathing in and out through the mouth and taking full deep breaths. So when you're breathing in, your belly expands. When you breathe out, it goes back to normal. And it can be at regular pace or a little bit faster than normal, like the fullness and depth is more important than the speed. So just to give you a little demo, if you can see this. And always moving out and in. And, don't make it so it's like stressful. You don't have to go 100%, just, and you want to breathe in a way where there are no gaps, where you're always breathing in or breathing out, just creating a wonderful circle of breath. So, but not creating any tension in your body. And after the first few minutes, if it gets towards the end where it gets very gentle and your breathing just wants to come back to normal or do nose breathing, it's totally fine. So, and you want to make sure you won't be disturbed. And I am going to do a music share, which takes more bandwidth. So you might want to close out all your other apps on your phone and make Zoom the main window and close out your Firefox and Chrome and that type of thing on your computer to make sure you get the best internet signal. And you just want to be comfortable. And if you have tight clothing, you might want to loosen your belt or something a little bit, not to interfere with your breathing. Okay. And again, as I said before, the basic instruction is just let whatever wants to happen, happen. You just have to focus on the breath and just allow the music to wash through you. You don't need to guide it. You don't need to set an expectation. You just need to be present and allow. Okay, so let's get started. And so if everyone can close their eyes, take a deep breath. Maybe let out a little sigh in the out breath. and bring your attention into your body. And just do a quick scan of your body to see if there's any tension you can release. Just kind of scan through your feet, your legs, belly area, and just go through each and just kind of energetically just visualize yourself being completely relaxed in your body. No tension, no stress. Sometimes people like to visualize like they're just floating down a river. And just complete relaxation as best as you can in this moment. And now starting to deepen the breath. Taking full deep breaths in and out of the mouth. Breathing deeply and fully, but not creating any tension in the body. No tension in the shoulders, just a full, deep, but enjoyable breath. Breathing fully and deeply, deeply and fully, fully and deeply. Staying with the breath, staying with the breath. And now breathing in a way where there are no gaps, where you're always breathing in or breathing out. Just creating a wonderful circle of breath. Breathing fully and deeply, deeply and fully, fully and deeply. And you can either breathe just at normal pace, or if it feels right, if it wants to happen, you can breathe a little bit faster than normal, but the fullness and depth is more important than the speed. Staying with the breath, fully and deeply, always breathing in or breathing out. Staying with the breath, staying with the breath. And now, letting go of any agendas you have for this coming session, any expectations, and just surrendering to the experience, letting life flow through you in whatever way it wants to. Staying with the breath, staying with the breath. And in a moment, the music will begin. Have a wonderful breathwork journey. Now being with yourself in a very gentle way. You can keep your eyes closed for a few more moments if that feels right. And if you haven't already, bringing your breath down to a normal rhythm. Taking a few moments just to be with yourself. Something we almost never do. Send yourself love, compassion. Just be with yourself in a very sweet, gentle way. And when you're ready, just on your own time, you can just slowly, gently open up your eyes, but open them up from a space of this love and compassion, just in a very gentle way with a gentle gaze. So how did that go for you, Fleet?
Very, very relaxing. Just the whole body just really feels in a beautiful flow and both energized and relaxed,
Yeah.
very awake. And yeah, just feels quite beautiful.
It's
Beautiful.
amazing how even just a few minutes of being present, being in your space, and just, my belief is always that if you can do something organic and naturally, like something like breath work, then you're meant to have those experiences. It's no substances, nothing external. It's all coming from within your own being.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I certainly enjoyed that, and I'm sure it set me up for a wonderful rest of my day. So, just before we finish here, just any other final thoughts for our viewers about breath work and the overall theme of our summit, rewiring our brains for optimal health and well-being?
Yes. Back 30 years ago, we really didn't understand the brain very well in terms of neuroplasticity. And based on current research on neuroplasticity, we know now that we can rewire our brain up until the day we die. And like for me, I'm about to turn 70, and I actually feel more vibrant and alive than I did 15 years ago. Part of it is with all these releases I've done through breath work. I'm just kind of really every day waking up with a vision towards my purpose in life. But it's been just this huge difference. And in breathwork, we have these participants in their 60s and their 70s, even in their 80s, that are getting profound shifts from breathwork. So they're still creating changes in their brain in how they see the world, where they can experience their lives from more of a place of joy and gratitude and excitement about being alive, instead of just kind of like, oh, I'm retired, I'm just kind of like living out my days. I see these just mind-blowing changes, even in people, no matter what age they are. So really, like, the message that I want to leave you is, whatever your situation, whatever happened in your past, however old you are, you can always make a profound difference in your life from this moment. And whether you use breath work or something else, psychedelics or other modalities, you just find what resonates with you. And as Fleet mentioned in the beginning, I offer a free session for everybody if they want to come try it on my platform, breathworkonline.com. And we also offer other things, like we have a upcoming Train Your Brain Master course. next month. So all kinds of stuff. So if you feel called to, ultimately the only way you know is to try it out. Would love to have you experience it for yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. This has been really enriching and such an empowering, encouraging message that it's never too late, that we can always start to improve our own health and well-being and life satisfaction and happiness at any time. And that methods like this are so readily available to us. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yes, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.